rode motorcycles, she loved decorating for various holidays, was a movie buff, and genuinely relished in her job's creative aspects. Laura will be profoundly missed. Christy Lynn Wilson was only 47 years old when her family lost the glue that held them together. Christy grew up in Lakewood, California, attending Lakewood High School, where she was a member of the cheerleading squad. She was popular and thrived in school, and maintained high school friendships well into adulthood. Christy studied fashion at Cerritos College, and created her own jewelry line she dubbed Almost Famous. Married to a husband Paul for 26 years, the couple shared 3 children, Keelan, Kaysen, and Connor. They also had 2 grandchildren. The couple met in 1986, and later married in 1988, staying madly in love until death separated them. Christy may have been a direct target due to her testimony at the custody hearing the previous day. However, Christy always wore a smile as a nail artist at the salon, and there was a confident ease with which she moved. She dreamed of retiring to a home somewhere on the water. Christy's loss will be felt by each person she has touched. Michelle Fournier was 48 years old when she lost her life at the hands of her ex-husband. She was born in 1963 in the Boston, Massachusetts area, and moved to Lakewood, California when she was a young girl. Michelle attended Lakewood High School, where she was a cheerleader, and would later go on to graduate from the school. She still had family in Boston, and came from a half-Italian family. Cooking was in her blood, and she loved to make huge family-style dinners. Others commented that she was most famous for her sauce and meatballs. Michelle had 2 children from a previous marriage, a daughter and a son, who were both in their 20s at the time of their mother's killing. In fact, just 2 days prior, Michelle celebrated her son's birthday making him his favorite meal, chicken enchiladas with verde sauce and sour cream. At Michelle's service, held at Cottonwood Church, he spoke to the crowd of mourners that he was happy his mom was able to see him turn 26 years old. Michelle's best friend of 40 years spoke at the service, remembering when they had first met in 3rd grade. Recounting all of the times that Michelle would break out her dance moves and had a knack for black shoes. Another trait that will always be remembered of Michelle: she loved to dance. When it was her daughter's turn to speak at the service, she mentioned that her mom was, quote, loving, beautiful, strong, independent woman. Michelle took pride in her Alamitos home and made sure that it was always neat and tidy. In addition to Michelle's 3 children, she is also survived by her parents and her sister. Seal Beach, California is a relatively small coastal city, covering just under 12 square miles. Incorporated as a city on October 27, 1915, the population as of 2019 was 23,896. Boeing is the city's largest employer, with about 1,000 people on staff. Seal Beach hosts various annual events, including a classic car show in April, a concert series in July, weekly concerts in August, a kite festival in September, and a Christmas parade in December. The 2nd largest wooden pier in the state of California is located in Seal Beach, and there are surfing locations aplenty, including the Seal Beach Pier and the river Stingray Bay.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter,
mass casualty incidents.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter,
mass casualty incidents.
Mike was a 41-year-old that grew up only blocks away from the beach, living with his grandparents. Mike was extremely active, loved to go boogie boarding, fish off the pier, and surf as a child. He was also the pitcher on the high school baseball team, and he played football. However, it was football where he truly excelled, and even earned a scholarship to USC. Interestingly, it was the same college his father played football at, with O.J. Simpson, of all people. Yet, his dad was never truly in Mike's life, and his mother and stepdad mainly raised him. The couple struggled to raise Mike. He was an unyielding child, whose door they had to remove from the hinges when he was only 12 years old, because he continued to have sex in his bedroom. At 12. Mike's one truly positive influence was his step-grandfather, whom he idolized. The step-grandfather was well known in the community, notably because he wore an eye patch about town, and residents called him Pirate as a result. Eventually, Mike moved into his step-grandparents' home, where he was spoiled rotten, getting just about anything he wanted. He was such a brat and was used to getting his way. Mike had terrible outbursts when things didn't go the way he wanted. His step-grandfather was always giving him money and helping out with his gambling debts. In fact, step-granddad was constantly bailing Mike out of his financial obligations. The last check that he wrote Mike was for $5,000, and the memo line read, "This is the last one." The number one person who looked out for Mike, his step-grandfather, passed away in September of 2005, and the death took a devastating toll on Mike. However, what seemed to upset him the most was the fact that his significant inheritance was left mainly to his step-grandfather's biological daughter. Not that Mike wasn't taken care of. His step-grandfather left him a hefty $400,000, and he received the last of it in 2009. When he was much younger, around 11 or 12, Mike used to go deep-sea fishing on the Pacific Ocean with his step-grandpa, and these trips greatly influenced Mike's ambitions. He worked through the teenage years for a business that chartered diving, fishing, and whale-watching tours. Then, in 1991, Mike began working his way towards earning a captain license for a ferry that ran between Catalina Island and the mainland. Unfortunately, Mike was fired in 2000 after being accused of illegal drug use, including heroin, to lose weight. After the termination, he filed a lawsuit alleging breach of contract and defamation, but both suits were dismissed. Mike married Michelle Fournier in 2003, and about 7 months after the wedding, she gave birth to their son. He was married once before this, but our research provided few details. In 2006, Michelle left Mike, claiming that he was unstable and violent, even once holding a gun to her head. She was frightened of him and expressed concern over the escalation in his behavior. She felt she needed to get out, immediately. Things took a turn in February of 2007 when Mike was injured while working on a tugboat called Emma Foss. The incident changed Mike, both physically and emotionally. A rope that tied the tugboat to a fuel barge snapped, pinning Mike's 26-year-old co-worker, Piper, against a wall and crushing her to death. As he attempted to save her, a metal cleat smashed into his leg, causing grave damage. However, what weighed on him the most was not being able to save his co-worker's life. Though he survived, Mike's leg break required a 9-hour surgery, and he spent a month in the hospital. Most that knew him say that Mike was never the same after the accident, and he was in continuous pain, plus suffering from PTSD, which was diagnosed in 2008. After he was finally permitted to be medically released from the hospital, Mike struggled to find work due to his new disability. His unemployment status and the impending divorce caused Mike to move into his mom and stepdad's house, which would serve as a dual purpose, providing stable housing for the ongoing custody issues. After a time of living there, his stepdad requested that Mike begin paying rent, which made Mike completely lose it. He came fully unglued and attacked his stepfather as his 4-year-old son watched. His stepdad filed for a temporary restraining order, and it was at the time of being served with that protection order that Mike's firearms were required to be surrendered to the police. He was also ordered to attend a batterer's intervention program that was a year long. Mike's issues with pain in his legs were so intense that he frequently wished that they had been amputated. A short time after the accident, the family hired a woman to care for Mike. He ended up marrying her, making her his third wife. Before his accident, Mike was described as a nice, friendly guy who was active and fit. After the accident, he became overweight and suffered from painful nerve and circulatory damage in both of his legs. Further complicating Mike's overall health was his bipolar diagnosis. People who really knew Mike saw a marked difference in the man he was from about 4 or 5 years before the tugboat accident. The custody battle that raged between Mike and Michelle took its toll and was explosive, to the point that the court limited the contact between the former couple to once per week. Including a bankruptcy in 1994, Mike grappled with financial burdens and had trouble keeping his finances in order. He maintained no online presence and showed no other major red flags that he would reach the level of rage and destruction he achieved on October 11th. Mike was initially arraigned on October 14, 2011, but attorneys requested an adjournment, which was granted. The rescheduled arraignment was held on November 29th. During his first hearing, Mike stood before the court, dressed in a mustard-colored jail uniform, represented by defense attorney Scott Sanders. Attorney Sanders immediately requested that the judge allow Mike to be administered antipsychotic medication while he awaited trial. He was held without bond, and his lawyers wanted to ensure Mike could adequately participate in his defense. The defense further requested that Mike's wife be permitted to inject Mike with his spinal cord stimulator, which was required due to the accident. Finally, the judge ordered a medical team to perform an evaluation on Mike.
We're here for a arraignment today. What is your pleasure?
At this time, we would enter a not guilty. We reserve all motions tonight as special relations to a formal review advisement. We've selected a date that's agreeable to both sides at this point. That date is April 24th, 2020.
Mr. Simmons, that's fine, Your Do you both believe by setting the date April 24th, 2012, that gives you adequate time to prepare to be ready for the preliminary hearing? Mr. Simmons?
We talked about this in the way. For us, it's unlikely, I think, that we can be ready on that date as early as April 24th. Taking the date seriously is a date that we're setting, but we've talked about it from our perspective. We've got probably a relatively small portion of the discovery at this point. The court is well aware of the nature of the case and the complexity of it. Again, we've only had the case for about a month and a half, perhaps a little less than that. So it's a date that we're setting. We certainly want to work toward it, but I think from our perspective, it's unlikely that we can be ready on that date.
Mr. Simmons?
Your Honor, we're hopeful that the defense will be ready. It's a date that we've selected with the hope that we can get it off the ground. That's 6 months since the crime occurred, and we're hopeful we're going to get it off the ground. That's our intent.
On the issue of discovery, if there's discovery issues, the court needs to be involved with the both and have this matter called up any day with a notice to the other, and I'm going to pray over to work out any discovery issues. My hope is that the discovery doesn't become a holdup on this case. I don't think that it will be. And I think you're both diligent in your cases, so I don't think it's a delay tactic in any way. But I don't want the discovery to become one issue for Mr. Sanders, is there anything else?
Yeah.
Mr. Simmons, anything else? And no bail applies. And Mr. Craig, you have the right to have a preliminary hearing within 2 court days, no longer than 60 calendar days from today's date. If I set 4/24 for a preliminary hearing, that's beyond the 60 calendar days. I don't have the power to do that. Only you do. You can go beyond the 60 days if you'd like. I'll set that date, 4/24. Do you agree to do that?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Matter set, 4/24/2012. Do you understand, Mr. Gray, that you'll have your prelim on that date or within a reasonable time thereafter?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you're fine with that?
Yes, Your Honor.
John?
Yes.
Okay. That'll be the court's order, 4/24/2012, Department C-55 at 8:30. And Mr. Simmons, is there anything else?
Nothing else, Your Honor.
Thank you. That'll be the court's order. Court's recess period.
Stop 5 minutes.
Prosecutors filed 8 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. The state initially indicated that they would seek the death penalty,